I want to read my favorite little Dharma talk of Suzuki Roshi this morning. It's called Letters from Emptiness. And it's one of those things that you can never quite say enough. Has a little preface to it. Although we have no actual written communications from the world of emptiness, we have some hints or suggestions about what is going on in that world. And that is, you might say, enlightenment. When you see plum blossoms or hear the sound of a small stone hitting bamboo, that is a letter from the world of emptiness. Shikantasa, that's the name of the kind of sitting that we do, which is just sitting. We don't have a mantra, we don't have a chant, we don't have visualization. Maybe in Tibetan practice it's closest to Dzogchen, and it's where Zen people start. We throw people into the deep water of just sitting. So Shikantasa is to practice or actualize emptiness. Although you can have a tentative understanding of it through your thinking or feelings, you should understand emptiness through your experience. You have an idea of emptiness and an idea of being, and you think that being and emptiness are opposites. But in Buddhism, both those ideas are being. The emptiness we mean is not like the idea you may have. You cannot reach a full understanding of emptiness with your thinking mind or your feeling. That's why we practice Zazen. We have a term, shosuko, which is about the feeling you have when you receive a letter from home. Even without an actual picture, you know something about your home, what people are doing there or which flowers are blooming. That is shosoku. Although we have no actual written communications from the world of emptiness, we have some hints or suggestions about what is going on in that world. And that is, you might say, enlightenment. When you see plum blossoms or hear the sound of a small stone hitting bamboo, that is a letter from the world of emptiness. Besides the world which we can describe, there's another kind of world. All descriptions of reality are limited expressions of the world of emptiness. I'll read it again. All descriptions of reality are limited expressions of the world of emptiness. Yet we attach to the descriptions and we think they are reality. That's a mistake, because what is described is not the actual reality. And when you think it's reality, your own idea is involved. And that's an idea of self. Many Buddhists have made this mistake. That is why they were attached to written scriptures or to the Buddha's words. They thought that his words were the most valuable thing, and that the way to preserve the teaching was to remember exactly what Buddha said. But what Buddha said was just a letter from the world of emptiness, just a suggestion, just some help from the Buddha. If someone else reads it, it may not make sense. That's the nature of the Buddha's words. To understand Buddha's words, we cannot rely on our usual thinking mind. If you want to read a letter from the Buddha's world, it's necessary to understand Buddha's world. To empty water from a cup does not mean to drink it up. To empty means to have direct, pure experience without relying on the form or color of being. So our experience is empty of our preconceived ideas, our idea of being, our ideas of big or small, round or square. Round or square, big or small, don't belong to reality. They're just ideas. That is, to empty water. That's what it really means. We have no idea of water, even though we see it. When we analyze our experience, we have ideas of time or space, big or small or heavy or light. A scale of some kind is necessary, and with various scales in our mind, we experience things. Still, the thing itself has no scale. That's something we add to reality. Because we always have a scale, and because we depend on it so much, we think the scale really exists. But it doesn't exist. If it did exist, it would exist with things. Using a scale, you can analyze one reality into entities, big and small, etc. But as soon as we conceptualize something, it's already a dead experience. Just parentheses, hold it for a second. It's like when you see something or you hear something, it's very, very difficult not to immediately compare it, decide whether you like it, dislike it, you're neutral about it. Compare it to other known quantities. Is it bigger, smaller, better, worse? This happens with the speed of thought. We empty ideas of big or small, good or bad, from our experience because the measurement that we use is usually based on the self. When we say good or bad, the scale is yourself. Who's doing the judging? Who's doing the liking? Who's doing the disliking? That scale's not always the same. Each person has a scale that is different. So I don't say that the scale is always wrong, but we're liable to use our selfish scale when we analyze or when we have an idea about something. So I don't say that the scale is always wrong, but we're liable to use our selfish scale when we analyze or when we have an idea about something. That selfish, I always hear selfish as self-ish. That selfish part should be empty. How we empty that part is to sit Zazen and become more accustomed to accepting things as it is, without any idea of big or small, good or bad. When I first heard that expression of Suzuki Roshi's, things as it is, I thought, oh, how charming. You know, the noun and the pronoun are not matched. Things is plural and it is singular. But over the years, I came to recognize it as brilliant because it's all one thing. Things look separate. Things as it is. It is all one thing. For artists or writers to accept their direct experience, they may paint or write. But if their experience is very strong and very pure, they may give up trying to describe it. They may just say, oh my. That's all. I like making miniature gardens around my house. And Suzuki Roshi was famous for moving boulders that was much heavier than he was. I like making miniature gardens around my house, but if I go to the stream and see the wonderful rocks and water running, I give up. Oh no, I'll never try to make a rock garden. It's much better to clean up the creek, picking up any paper or fallen branches. This is a beautiful paragraph. That's my ruler. In nature itself, there is beauty that is beyond beauty. When you see a part of it, you think maybe this rock should be moved one way and that rock should be moved another way, and then it will be a complete garden. Because you limit the actual reality using the scale of your small self, there's either a good garden or a bad garden, and you want to change some stones. But if you see the thing itself as it is, with a wider mind, there's no need to do anything. The thing itself is emptiness. But because you add something to it, you spoil the actual reality. So if we don't spoil things, that's what we mean when we say to empty things. When you sit in Shikantasa, don't be disturbed by sounds. Don't operate your thinking mind. This means not to rely on any sense organ or the thinking mind. Just receive the letter from the world of emptiness. That's Shikantasa. A lot of people think that when you sit meditation, you're supposed to stop your mind from thinking, and they exhaust themselves trying to stop their thoughts. Maybe closer to say that we are expanding mind to cover our whole body and our mudra and everything about us. So then there's no duality. There's no body and no mind. We can let the mind be the mind, and the activities of mind will go on, but nobody's home to attach to them. To empty is not the same as to deny. Usually when we deny something, we want to replace it with something else. When I deny the blue cup, it means I want the white cup. When you argue and deny someone else's opinion, you're forcing your own opinion on another. That is what we usually do. But our way is not like that. By emptying the added element of our self-centered ideas, we purify our observation of things. When we see and accept things as they are, we have no need to replace one thing with another. That's what we mean by to empty. If we empty things, letting them be as it is, then things will work. Originally, things are related and things are one, and as one being, it will extend itself. To let it extend itself, we empty things. When we have this kind of attitude, then without any idea of religion, we have religion. When this attitude is missing in our religious practice, it will naturally become like opium. To purify our experience and to observe things as it is to understand the world of emptiness and to understand why Buddha left so many teachings. In our practice of Shikantasa, we do not seek for anything, because when we seek for something, an idea of self is involved. Then we try to achieve something to further that idea of self. That's what you're doing when you make some effort. But our effort is to get rid of self-centered activity. That's how we purify our experience. For instance, if you're reading, your wife or your husband may say, "Would you like to have a cup of tea?" "Oh, no, I'm very busy," you may say. "Don't bother me." When you're reading in that way, I think you should be careful. You should be ready to say, "Yeah, that would be wonderful. Please bring me a cup of tea." Then you stop reading and have a cup of tea, and after your cup of tea, you continue reading. Otherwise, your attitude is, "I am very busy right now." Well, that's not so good, because then your mind is not actually in full function. One part of your mind is working hard, but the other part may not be working so hard. You may be losing your balance in your activity. If it's reading, it may be okay, but if you're making calligraphy, for instance, and your mind is not in a state of emptiness, your work will tell you, "I'm not in a state of emptiness, so you should stop." If you're a Zen student, you should be ashamed of making such calligraphy. To make calligraphy is to practice Zazen. So when you're working on calligraphy, if someone says, "Please have a cup of tea," and you answer, "No, I'm making calligraphy," then your calligraphy will say, "No, you can't fool yourself." I want you to understand what we're doing here at Zen Center. Sometimes it may be all right to practice Zazen as a kind of exercise or training to make your practice stronger or to make your breathing smooth and natural. That's perhaps included in practice. But when we say Shikantasa, that's not what we mean. When we receive a letter from the world of emptiness, then the practice of Shikantasa is working. So we say very often, or I say, but I was taught very often, we don't sit Zazen to become enlightened. If we sit down with an idea of ourself over here and enlightenment over here, very, very difficult to bring them together. We don't sit Zazen. We don't perfect our Zazen. Zazen sits Zazen. And sometimes it feels like you're doing nothing. But I want to tell you the story of Quang Duc. Quang Duc was a Buddhist monk in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, when President Diem, who was a Catholic, put out very strict edicts against the Buddhists. And this caused a lot of suffering, made it illegal to practice their holidays, and put repressions on the temples. So Quang Duc wrote him a letter. You can read the letter. It's a very gentle letter, begging him to reconsider. It had this curious line, as I go to meet the Buddha, and he writes him this letter. And then he moved into the center of a very crowded intersection, and several colleagues poured gasoline all over him and set him afire. And he sat there in perfect Zazen, without moving, until he fell over, and then he pushed himself back upright. And he sat upright until he died. And it was a photograph that went around the world, and President Kennedy said it was the most potent photograph in all of history. And it was one of the activities which actually made the American public realize the horror that was going on in Vietnam and the degree to which people were suffering. David Halberstam, a very famous reporter, covered it, and it was shocking. But it was a kind of selflessness that we don't often think about or think it's possible. I mean, I've sat Zazen for 47 years. I'm not sure I could sit immobile while I was burning up. But it was an expression of Quang Duc's commitment to Buddha's truth that he could do that. So there's nothing inherently uncommitted about being a Buddhist. It's just that when we want to bring attention to something, we don't shout in the street. We usually just sit, meditate in front of a nuclear power plant, or meditate in front of the police, because that's our essential practice and those are our essential values. It's not that we pretend that suffering doesn't exist. Someone wrote me a little note this morning and said, what do we do about grieving? I find myself grieving for the world. I find myself grieving for my nation. I find myself grieving for the sick and the dying. Buddha was the prince of a nation. And when his nation was overrun, he was very clear that he was grieving, that he was in mourning. It's not that we're one or the other. It's not that enlightenment is a fence that we climb over and we exist on the other side in some state of perfect bliss and we never suffer because we know that everything is empty. We also have an individuated existence. And then in that existence, we attach to things. We love our children, we love our family, we may love our country. But we also understand that such feelings are empty. We can have the courage to experience them. We can have the courage to experience them and not blame others. We just feel the grief and we burn it to ash. And then it's gone. And the next moment, something else. Or maybe the next week. I think I told you once, I spent an entire session, 7 days, weeping. Not fun, embarrassing. But when it was over, that grief was gone. I'm going to just look here and see if my mystery companion has sent me any questions that people have asked. She's asking me, she wants me to copy. Let me see if I see any questions. Thousands. Here's a note from an old friend. Scale. Once falling asleep, I had a sudden sense of the entire range of scales simultaneously, from the atomic to the galactic. Made my gut feel like I was falling. Lasted only a second. Those are the kind of experiences that tell us that we're on the right path. And it's what Suzuki Roshi meant when he says, it's a hint. There's a beautiful Japanese poem about most of the moon being occluded by clouds. And you just see a little edge of the moon. And when you see that edge of the moon, you're reminded, you see very clearly in your mind's eye, the fullness of the entire moon. And so enlightenment is like that. From the edge of the moon, we see the whole moon. So from the sound of a pebble against bamboo, the entire universe comes into focus. No soil, no bamboo. No birds, no bamboo. No rocks, no bamboo. No insects, no bamboo. No microbes in the soil, no bamboo. So in that way, it's a letter from emptiness. And somebody's saying, Jennifer asked, what does a letter of emptiness look like? I read the Heart Sutra once, and the Heart Sutra tells you a great deal about emptiness. No form, no feeling, no perceptions, no impulses, no consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of eyes until no realm of mind consciousness, no ignorance and also no extinction of it until no old age and death and also no extinction of it. Somebody once asked me, how old is emptiness? The unborn doesn't have birthdays. So it's why you can't think your way to understanding emptiness. It's why Zazen is such a powerful technology. And only by sitting over and over, like walking in the fog, eventually you get drenched. It's not a pill you can drop. It's not an I get it. You have to persist. Somebody is saying, I guess there were still emojis floating up and down while we were meditating. I didn't see them, but I wish people wouldn't do that. And again, I'll say, I appreciate your messages, but I don't have time to see videos and pursue links. I'm really sorry. I want to read one other little quote from Suzuki Roshi, because I think it's really pertinent to right now. This debate, this politicizing of masks. Do we wear masks? Don't we wear masks? Do we wear our no mask like a flag? Do we wear our mask like a flag? I want to just read this. It's a big mistake to think that the best way to express yourself is to do whatever you want, acting however you please. This is not expressing yourself. When you have many possible ways of expressing yourself, you're not sure of what to do. And you do it. When you have many possible ways of expressing yourself, you're not sure what to do, so you'll behave superficially. If you know what to do exactly and you do it, you can express yourself. That's why we follow forms. You may think that you cannot express yourself within a particular form, but when we're all practicing together, strong people will express themselves in a strong way, and kind people will express themselves kindly. When we pass the sutra cards along a row, we pass out the words to chants, and they're passed from person to person. When we pass the sutra cards along the row now during service, you each do it in your own way. The differences among you are easy to see because the form is the same. It's really important. Everybody's passing a card, but everybody does it a little differently. So within that form, your distinctions stand clear. The differences among you are easy to see because the form is the same. And because we repeat the same thing over and over again, we can understand our friends' ways eventually. Even if your eyes are shut, you know, oh, that was so-and-so. This is the advantage of having rules and rituals. Without this kind of practice, relationships with people will be very superficial. If someone wears a beautiful robe, here, and he rubbed his own robe and he laughed, you'll think he must be a good priest. If someone gives you a beautiful thing, you'll think he's very kind and that she's a wonderful person. This kind of understanding is not so good. Usually our society works in a superficial, frivolous way. The controlling power is money or some big noise. Our eyes and ears are not open or subtle enough to see and hear things. Most people who visit Zen Center find it a very strange place. They don't talk much. They don't laugh. What are they doing? Those who are accustomed to big noises may not notice, but we communicate without talking so much. We may not always be smiling, but we feel what others are feeling. Our mind is always open, and we're expressing this fully. We can extend this practice to city life and be good friends with one another. This is not difficult when you decide to be honest with yourself and express yourself fully without expecting anything. Just being yourself, just being ready to understand others is how to extend your practice into everyday life. We don't know what will happen. If you fail to express yourself fully on each moment, you may regret it later. Because you expect some future time, you miss your opportunity and you're misunderstood by your friend. Don't wait to express yourself fully. This is the wonderful book, Not Always So. I've read it and read it and read it and read it. I never tire of it. There were so many things I wanted to talk about today that I narrowed it down to this. I was going to talk about this interesting story about the black militias that came out in Newsweek. Very powerful, troubling, exciting, worrisome. 1,000 black soldiers in a militia, all holding their weapons like they were trained, fingers outside the trigger guard. 1,000 went to a state park in North Carolina or South Carolina. And they were escorted by the police. They had a right to bear arms. They were long guns. They thanked the police for escorting them. And they walked right into the center of a place which is quite normally a white supremacist stronghold. I don't know if you've heard about these guys called the Boogaloos. But they wear floppy hats and they're kind of happy-go-lucky guys that want to start a civil war. They want to start a race riot. And this black militia moved right into their home turf and said, "We are in your home. Either come out and fight us or join us in protesting against the government." It was very powerful. And you could see by the clarity and of their expression, these guys are not fooling around. These guys are warriors. And it's hard to believe that something like this hasn't occurred before. I used to be a big follower of Malcolm X. Very impressed by his biography and his work, and was in a theater piece that was inspired by his work. And of course he was kind of mistranslated by the majority press, as were the Black Panthers. When the Black Panthers showed up in the 60s with their guns, they were taken as such a threat. They were executed in their beds. They were arrested on pretext. There were snitches and informers were put amongst them. And we got rid of the Black Panthers. We wiped out the black political intellectuals. And we got the Crips and the Bloods. And now 45 years later, millions of people are in the streets, white people among them, in large numbers this time. But this militia is expecting a backlash. And one of the things that concerns me is human beings are human beings. And it would be very easy for the United States to turn into Yemen or Iraq, where society is torn apart by mafias and rival gangs and ideologies, and they're all fighting for survival and to tear off pieces to own. So that's what makes me worry about this. And in a way, it's really on white people, because white people have tolerated for 400 years conditions that are intolerable to black people. And the question is not if you like them or don't. You don't have to love black people as a culture. But if you believe in America, then black citizens have the same right to their constitutional rights and privileges as anyone else. And if the majority doesn't stand up for this, they're tolerating it. And if they tolerate the intolerable, it will just be a matter of time before we see armed militias prepared to do battle. So personally, I admire these men. But personally, I grieve that the situation has come to this, where 1,000 warriors have to say, we are ready to die to change this situation. But African Americans are 13% of the population. They need 38% of white people to get to 51%. So what's on the line right now is, do we believe in democracy for all citizens? And will we discomfort ourselves, we meaning the Caucasian majority? Do we believe in it strongly enough, as that black militia does, to put everything on the line and say, this is the America we want to live in? So I'll just leave you with that to think about. I think that's enough for today. I have to go visit a sick friend. I thank you all very much for showing up. Do my little 3-line prayer. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace.